What's going on, YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte, and today we are taking a look up in Broad Street, Philadelphia. We're heading to Philadelphia today as the Philadelphia Flyers have announced the next head coach of their team. There's a little bit of a backstory to this whole situation. We've gotten a rejected offer from another big-name head coach, would have been the highest paid head coach in NHL history. He rejected that offer. We also look at some of the other finalists other than John Tortorella that were in the running. That was kind of interesting as well. Of course, there was some guys that are former players of John Tortorella chiming in on Twitter. So we're going to go over all of that today. So the Philadelphia Flyers have their next guy, Mike Yeo, officially out. And the new guy coming in, John Tortorella. Now, this is not, uncharted waters for John Tortorella. He spent a lot of time in the Northeast. He's from Boston, Massachusetts. He started coaching at the ACHL level as a head coach. He won a championship in his first season. He ended up going to the Buffalo Sabres organization where he spent many years. He was an assistant in the AHL for the New Haven Nighthawks. I didn't even know that was a team. He was an assistant in Buffalo throughout the 90s. He became the head coach of the Rochester Americans of the American Hockey League. Not to mention he won a championship there in one of his 2 seasons in Rochester. He ended up moving back into the NHL picture. He ends up going to Phoenix as an assistant coach of the Phoenix Coyotes. He did that for 3 seasons until 2000, where he took the job as the head coach of the New York Rangers. He was an assistant the first season. Eventually he became the head coach later that season. He only was there for 4 games. He ends up going down to Tampa Bay, where he did pretty well. It didn't really start off well for him. Missed the playoffs the first 2 seasons in Tampa Bay. They make the playoffs, and next thing you know, the Tampa Bay Lightning win a Stanley Cup in 2004. That was his first Stanley Cup championship at the coaching level. He would stay in Tampa Bay up until 2008. At the conclusion of that season, 82-game schedule in 2008, that summer he would leave to go back to the Big Apple, where he had already coached 4 games for the New York Rangers in the early 2000s. And just about a decade later is once again the head coach of the Broadway Blue Shirts. He would spend a lot of time with the Rangers, but really not much success. They were always a first-round exit, second-round exit. They did get to the conference finals in 2012, where they inevitably lost to the Boston Bruins, who would inevitably win the Stanley Cup. But that was as close as they got with Tortorella. He would end up getting let go through 48 games in the season of the 2012-13 season, and he was no longer a coach of the Rangers. Didn't take too long for him, though. The next season, he became the head coach of the Vancouver Canucks, and kind of interestingly enough, he lasted 1 season in Vancouver. He's just too raw for the city of Vancouver, way too outspoken, and he's just got he's got that mentality that just doesn't fit most Vancouver people or most Canucks out there. And I just think that just when they said that, I didn't see that as a fit. They missed the playoffs. They didn't do very well. And it was kind of like, all right, we need our next guy. So failed experiment there. He spent 1 season in Vancouver. And we get to the point where he most recently resided. He was in Columbus from 2015 until 2021. He spent 6 seasons with the Columbus Blue Jackets. They did make the playoffs 4 of those 6 seasons. And you could argue, you could thank John Tortorella a lot for the success of the Columbus Blue Jackets today. He really put them on the map. They obviously had that, John Tortorella was there when they had beaten the Tampa Bay Lightning, who were the best team during the regular season, swept them in a 4-game series in the first round. And we know how things have gone for Tampa since then. So John Tortorella has been around the block. He's definitely been, his first NHL coaching gig was in 1990. So he's been coaching for over 3 decades now. And this is a guy that is going to bring the right fit to Philadelphia. I'm sure you guys know, the Flyers fans out there, I went to a game there last year. I hope to go to at least 1 or 2 more this season. The Flyers fans out there, you guys have had it rough. I mean, you guys want to see a tougher team to play against, a little more physical. That's why I think guys like Jerry Mayhew made the lineup and those types of players that were just gritty guys. They weren't really that good, but they were tough to play against, laying big hits, and I think that the Flyers want to see more of that. And when you bring in John Tortorella, you're definitely going to get that. So now's the backstory. So now I think it's a good hire. It's a good fit overall. But we need the context of how we got to John Tortorella becoming the head coach. So there was news coming out last week, and this was from Kevin Weeks. John Tortorella is expected to be named the new head coach of the Philadelphia Flyers. They've offered him the position, but the deal is not done yet, and that was, again, per Kevin Weeks. We eventually find out that John Tortorella is hired as the next head coach on a 4-year contract, $4 million per season. That's $16 million over 4 seasons for Torts to be behind the Flyers bench. Pretty big move there. And then we got another interesting report to kind of stack on that. So apparently, Barry Trotz was offered, I think, a lot more money. It was something, I think it was $7 million per season to be behind the bench for the Flyers. He ended up turning down that offer. He turned down the offer, and he is still on the market at the making of this video. So Barry Trotz was their top option, and John Tortorella was the next guy. But there's even more to that. So now it's kind of, before he's even stepped in, he's already known as the B option. So that kind of sucks PR-wise. And then we get the other finalist, and good thing they did get Tortorella. So this was from Arthur Staple, who's actually a former Islanders and now a Rangers insider. I'm not sure how he pulled this one out. But Pete DeBoer and Jack Capuano were the other 2 finalists for the Flyers head coaching spot. Very odd, especially when you consider, Pete DeBoer makes a little bit of sense. He has had success really where he's gone, not really with the Vegas Golden Knights, but when his time in San Jose, they got to the Cup final, they lost to Pittsburgh. In New Jersey, they got to the Cup final, lost to the LA Kings. So he has had some mitigating success. He reminds me a lot of Alain Vigneault. His message gets stale very quickly, but he has gotten his teams motivated and gotten them into deep playoff runs, and I think that's what you're looking at with DeBoer. And obviously, again, that connection to the Devils, which he wasn't too far from, it would make sense. Jack Capuano was the one that kind of threw everybody off. They were kind of making fun of the Flyers, this is a finalist. Jack Capuano was the head coach of the New York Islanders during the dark days. This is a guy that was the head coach of the Islanders in the mid-2010s. They were not a very good hockey team. They had just gotten John Tavares, Josh Bailey, and all those young players. But it was just so interesting that he was one of the finalists. Now, this isn't the first time that the Flyers have delved into the market for a former Islanders coach. Recently, I remember they got Scott Gordon, who was the New York Islanders head coach, and he ended up going down to the American Hockey League to be the head coach of the Philadelphia Flyers American Hockey League affiliate, the Lehigh Valley Phantoms. He had coached there in the AHL for a couple seasons, and he ended up becoming the head coach of the Philadelphia Flyers. We know things didn't work out too well in that regard. He didn't last very long. But this isn't the first time that the Flyers have gone after ex-Islander head coaches and tried to make it work. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and I figured I'd point that out. And when you're looking at Tortorella, there was a tweet from Brandon Dubinsky, who had spent time with him in New York with the Rangers, and he also spent time with him in Columbus, where he ended his NHL career, and he said, prayers for the NHL's Flyers players. So he's kind of giving, prayers to the Flyers players because it's going to be rough under Torts, and I thought that was pretty funny. Really, the underlying thing I want to talk about here today is where is the direction of the Flyers? Because if you're rebuilding, you're not bringing in John Tortorella. This doesn't seem like a rebuild. So it does make you wonder going into this summer, do they go after a guy that isn't available in a free agency? Now, the problem is they don't have much cap space. That's why they couldn't keep Claude Giroux. So it depends on what they do. I do expect Chuck Fletcher to make some moves to alleviate some cap space. Maybe they do try to bring G back. Maybe they do try to bring in a Nazem Kadri or somebody else of that caliber. But it's one of those things that I wonder if players will be deterred from going to Philadelphia now because Tortorella is there. We've seen he has had that sort of impact where I remember when he was with the Rangers, Artem Anisimov had requested a trade out. He was like, I don't want to be here. You know, this Tortorella guy sucks. So we've seen that before. Dubinsky to an extent, and he ended up getting again in Columbus. Pierre-Luc Dubois recently with the Blue Jackets had a lot of problems with Torts. So it's a laundry list of guys that had problems under Tortorella, and they just didn't fit that bill. But from the Flyers' perspective, I understand why they want to do this. Chuck Fletcher wants to give this team another opportunity to go and win. They had a lot of injuries last season. Ryan Ellis was hurt most of the season. Coots was out most of the year. Joel Farabee was out for a portion of the season. They were playing a lot of guys from the Lehigh Valley Phantoms in the top six in their forward core. And even on the defense looked a little bit thin throughout the season. It's one of those things where if they get a decent backup behind Carter Hart, a more reliable guy than Martin Jones, if they're able to find some depth up front, that's, similar to what they had this season in Derek Brassard. And again, at the end of the day, you got to stay healthy. That's really the key thing for the Flyers, and not losing those guys like Ellis and Couturier for parts of the season. But now you have to replace guys like Claude Giroux, who are no longer there. So that's when we're going to see more of the young guys coming in on the back end. Cam York, up front, guys like Owen Tippett, who they acquired for G. So this is going to be a very interesting Flyers team. They're definitely going to be a little bit different in their mindset. I know they've tried to get faster and more skilled, but when you hire Tortorella, you're going to be getting more of that hard-nosed, blue-collar-esque game, which it's kind of going against what the Flyers have been doing recently. So it is a little bit odd to me that they would bring in Tortorella. Like I said, it makes sense for the Philadelphia Flyers team. It's just the direction the Flyers have been going in the past couple of seasons, with guys like Farabee and Couturier, that now they'd have to be maybe limiting those guys a little bit more for the defensive side of the game. I just wonder how that's going to go. And I think one of the guys that's going to probably benefit the most from this is a guy like Couturier, because he is such a good two-way center. He might even win the Selke next season. I think this is a great fit for him as a player, but for the team as a whole, I think it will be interesting. He's definitely going to get the love fare from the Flyers fans, that blue-collar, just hard-nosed mindset, just no BS, just say it how it is. John Tortorella will fit well with the PR of the Flyers organization and their fan base. But with that said, I do wonder, are the Flyers is Chuck Fletcher really trying to press the gas on 5 miles till empty, and he's just trying to see what he could get out of this team? Does he still really think this is a playoff team? I don't really know. But let me know what you guys think. What are some moves they could make this summer to try and make this team a little bit better, to maybe make the playoffs? I think they're a little bit of a ways from that, from what most of you guys have said throughout the last couple months. I haven't talked about the Flyers in a little bit, so I figured I'd mention them today. Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you again next time.